Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're at episode 465, I believe, today. Is that... Boy, they're ticking along. Welcome to the show, Bill Bennett.
Hi, Paul.
Great to have you back. It's been a little while since we've had a chance to catch up on the podcast.
Months, yeah.
It's great to see you, and always good to hear your insights and opinions. Lots to chat about, as always. We've tried to kind of keep the agenda, though, not too crazy. First thing up this week that I wanted to delve into a little bit is this political advertising ban from Twitter. Now, there's been all sorts of discussion and varying media around why this is happening. I guess there's been the normal sort of questions that are asked, be they by cynical people or otherwise, around how much advertising is Twitter going to lose by banning political advertising, and it's suggested that number's reasonably small.
Yeah, look, I think the thing is, there's all kinds of problems with that idea. I mean, what is a political advertisement? When does it stop? Do you know, today I voted for my New Zealand Bird of the Year. You know, the Bird of the Year thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that...
What did you vote for?
Mainly albatrosses.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. But now albatrosses and dotterels.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're allowed to vote for 5 now.
Yes. Right.
And I noticed, right, that I think it's one of the political parties. I think it's the Green Party wants everyone to vote for a particular bird. Right now, if that appeared on Twitter, would that be a political advertisement? And there's a whole lot of very sort of, grey areas. And there's a huge amount of grey areas about what is a political advert. Is it a political advert if you're campaigning against the tax, and so on. So I think the problem is that actually policing that is going to be quite hard. Now, it's a good idea. I mean, I'm all for it. I think it's actually something Twitter... it's a lovely thing that Twitter's done to score points off of Facebook that way as well, by the way.
Yeah, it makes Facebook look
bad.
Bad.
But everything makes Facebook look bad.
Poor Facebook.
Yeah. Well, no, not poor Facebook. Very rich Facebook. Yeah. But seriously, it does make Facebook look bad, and it's a good gesture by Twitter. What I think is going on here, though, is I think Twitter is actually working at being the good social media company. I think that's something that's deliberate and strategic. And when the guy Jack Dorsey came here to meet Jacinda, it was about Twitter being the good, responsible social media company. Zuckerberg
Agreed.
doesn't turn up even when he's summoned to parliaments. Doesn't turn up, and he thinks he doesn't have to be good or responsible or whatever. He thinks that responsibility is for little people. But
I'm sure there's a bit of a difference, though, in terms of the size and scale of Facebook, their value and so on.
Easily.
So there's probably a little bit less of or more demand on Mark Zuckerberg than there would be on Jack Dorsey.
Of course there is, but the thing is that
part of that picture. But yeah, he does appear to sort of
they want to be good.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
They want to be good. They want to be the friendly neighbourhood social media.
Yeah,
and that's good. And that's a good thing. That's smart marketing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And it's probably good for democracies as well to be like that. How they police it, I've got no idea.
That's supposed to be released over the next week or two, isn't it?
Yeah, my feed is full of people on both sides of Parliament. I follow politicians on, all 4 sides of Parliament. And partly because of my job, and I'm a journalist, I need to see what those people are saying and thinking. Quite a lot of what they say and do is definitely political, but I suspect that if you just tweet something, that doesn't actually count.
Yeah, well, I think that the political side of social media has got good and bad to it, hasn't it? And what Dorsey was saying is that he thinks, well, let's take the advertising out and let the content that's truly good float to the top. Now, there's a degree to which I agree with that, but then there's also the the echo chamber type thinking. Now, you and I, and I'm sure a chunk of our listeners would follow a broad mix, but that's not the case across the whole population. And
you've got to be conscious of it to do it as well.
Yeah. And that's probably part of the challenge, in that the general public aren't necessarily going to get that broader view if you're particularly left-leaning or particularly right-leaning. Then you're likely to mostly be seeing content down that track. The sort of people that you follow are going to probably retweet in line with that. I don't know too many people in New Zealand who would be retweeting Trump, especially. But Republican views. I mean, I think
it happens.
Sure, but I think broadly you look at it in New Zealand, and you're going to be getting a more left-leaning probably viewpoint on Twitter. Would be my pick, but
Facebook is more consciously, more deliberately manipulative in what you get to see. Right, that's part of its shtick. That's what made Cambridge Analytica rich and now out of business. That's definitely part of the mix. And that's part of what Facebook does. Is they make they have this formula for getting you angry and getting you engaged. Right, it is manipulative. Same thing goes for YouTube. I mean, it's funny because I was looking at some YouTube videos about something completely unrelated to politics. It was absolutely not even in that ballpark, and yet pretty soon 2 or 3 down the list of suggested things were like crazy stuff about there being the world is in fact donut shape and there are flying saucers coming out in the middle, that kind of stuff.
Fantastic, Bill. You might have learned something about this donut Earth of ours.
Yeah, but there were also sort of extremist political rants from the far right in there as well.
Yep.
And it's got absolutely no connection with anything with what I was looking at. I mean, I was actually looking at stuff about early house music. How it's completely divorced from Republican politics, and yet it's there.
Maybe they know something about you, Bill, that you didn't know about yourself.
Well, yeah, it could be. But you know what I'm saying, though. There's that sort of level of manipulation.
Yes.
Twitter, by and large, is not as manipulative a format as Facebook or YouTube. I don't like the fact that on the Twitter iOS app that you start to get these sort of recommended tweets rather than your actual timeline. I don't like that. But it's not filled with sort of hate and bile and let's get people really cross stuff. But no, I think Twitter. Let's put it down to good marketing, sensible marketing.
I think the point that they raised, though, with this manoeuvre is that there really is quite a big risk on when we look at the impact on democracy of social media advertising and its ability to zoom in on what is generally a small percentage of the population who are those voters who are sitting on the fence. And whoever's basically, I don't know if smarter is the right way to put it, but whoever is able to get the right data sets and the right settings, and then possibly through content that isn't fully truthful, convince people to change their viewpoints. And that sort of thing, certainly for me, leaves me feeling, hey, this is good. Thumbs up to Twitter here. Thumbs down, a dislike to Facebook for creating this position. And look, we look at the results of the US election. We look at the results of Brexit. These are both things that are under a cloud of concern around Cambridge Analytica's involvement and the way that the results were maybe brought about through manipulative advertising.
Yeah, and some of that isn't necessarily directly relevant to the issues in front of you during an election. So, for example, some of the tweets around the Brexit time was actually. Not some of the tweets, some of the social media content that you would see in order to influence you to vote against, to leave Europe, for the British to leave Europe, was things like pictures of queues at the Turkish border of people wanting to emigrate, or refugees coming in from the Middle East and so on. Now, that's not actually directly related to Brexit. But
pretty hard to categorise and put it into the banned category, I imagine.
Yeah, but it's just that sort of little fearful thing going on, well, perhaps if we don't act, these people are going to end up on our doorsteps, and that there's a kind of person who that is just red mist comes down in front of their eyes. So that's what I meant about manipulative. But the manipulation doesn't necessarily have to be directly related to what's in front of you in terms of an election. So yeah, I think 2 thumbs up for Twitter, possibly 3.
Good. Now, Google, a small acquisition that they're making. A particular wearables company known as Fitbit, who have sold quite a ton of devices over the last few years. Certainly, when I look around, if someone is wearing a gadget that's not a traditional watch, what are you wearing? Yours looks like
I'm wearing a traditional old-fashioned watch.
Yeah, I like. See that's a real watch right there.
I've gone back to these after having tried those things.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm always curious, and me, I like to be testing some gadget or other. And look, Fitbit have been impressive in that they keep releasing new devices. They've got a broad range at a whole lot of price points, and look, they're not at those cheaper price points. You can go out and buy a wearable that'll do a somewhat similar job from a non-US brand for a quarter or less of the price. Who knows about your data? But with Google acquiring Fitbit, the question here is how much of this is about Google getting access to Fitbit's data, and how much of it is about Google just trying to bulk up what they're doing with their what used to be called Android Wear or Wear OS, and sort of bringing these together, gaining market share for their own product. Because when we look at Google, I mean, they're a data company, right? And that leads into the
let's just go back a step, right? There's 2 games in town in wearables, and the 2 games in town are Fitbit and Apple, right? Everything else is an also-ran.
To a degree. I mean, I looked at some stats recently, and the numbers are coming along on some of the other brands. There is business there, even for the likes of Garmin. It's smaller, but their market shares are growing.
Yeah, but they're still also rans,
and Samsung too with their stuff. I mean,
but where I was going with that point, right, is it's a bit like the shape of the tablet market was a few years ago, right, where you had Apple with the iPad range, you had some quite nice Android tablets from Samsung, and a real long tail of indistinguishable, not very good Android brand tablets, right? And the prices could be quite low, but
sure.
But it was, and the watch market is, I mean, it's not the same shape, but there's some similarity going on there. Now, what I think is happening is, first of all, I think Fitbit sold to Google because Fitbit didn't have a long-term future as an independent business.
Yeah,
it was in trouble. It didn't have the depth of finance to be able to basically sit out the next few years. So and really, this was from Fitbit's point of view, this is a terrific exit strategy, getting out of the game. So that's to a degree what was going on. There's another thing going on here, which I'll get to the question about data in a moment, but there's another thing going on here, which is the big 6 technology companies, and it could be, we could be talking about more than just the big 6, but the big technology companies, the Amazons, Googles, Apples, Microsofts, Samsungs, Facebook, and so on, are actually snatching up a lot of the 2nd and 3rd tier companies. It's been going on now for quite some time. So more and more power, if you like, more and more clout resides in those bigger companies. They're clutching more and more into their orbit. Now, the reason they're doing that is because there's always data attached to these things, and it's basically who's got the biggest data pile, because that data doesn't necessarily, the Fitbit data which Google acquires will be will be stuck into silos and be crawled through by AI bots or whatever for the next 2 or 3 years, and lots of stuff will come out of that which will be valuable to Google, which we might not be able to imagine right now what that is. I mean, some of it could be things like medical, pharmaceutical discovery and stuff even. But anyway, the thing is that data is hugely valuable to those companies, and basically those big companies are just acquiring more and more of it, and that's what's really going on here. So the fact that it's a wearable, is almost neither here nor there. What it is another big pile of data. It's another, few desert-located data centers full of interesting data for these people to get their mitts on and delve into. So that's what's really going on. There's a secondary story about Wear OS and so on, and I think that's of interest. I don't know about that. I think the wearable market, it became mature really fast, actually. And I think we're at that sort of maturity stage now. But
I think there's certainly a way to go on the technology development. But,
but as a market, it's quite mature.
It's certainly, not as variable as it was in the past. But the number of devices still seems to be growing at quite a reasonable clip, actually.
Well,
as the products, as you say, have matured, they've got to this point where most of them are really good. Waiting on to see Huawei's new what's the new one called? I think it's just landing this week in New Zealand. And I think they're talking about up to 2 weeks battery life. Color screen smartwatch. I know a bunch of people. One of the team here who's using the Samsung. There's half a dozen brands there that are doing okay and are holding their own and still growing their.
But are they doing
sales.
okay? You see, I'm not sure they are doing okay. But here's the strange thing about that. I really thought perhaps there's not much going on there. Turns out, right, that Apple's watch business would be a Fortune 500 company if it stood alone.
It's massive.
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't. There isn't the excitement about that there is about other products, and I still think that to a degree, wearables is a relatively niche market. It's never going to get the penetration that phones or laptops have had in the past. Or at least not in
I'm not so sure. I think it will just keep going gradually. I mean, we don't have what do we used to call it, the killer app, that thing that you really need it for. But gradually, I think as capabilities get added, battery life improves, these bits and pieces, as it becomes useful for actually monitoring our everyday health. Once you join the dots up and your GP's being passed data, or the health system is able to access data in a way that's good for us, or your insurance company is going
in a way that's good for us.
Well, and that's the important bit, right? I mean, I'm not going to wear something if it's going to make my insurance go up. But if it brings my insurance down, then look, if I've got to wear something that will cut my insurance in half, I definitely would. Now, I guess it depends on a lot of factors, but the cost of the technology is very, very low, and then you add in those aspects of style and so on, which Apple tends to do quite well, and over time the other brands move into that space. And I think it's fair to say most of the vendors actually have some really nice looking devices.
They do. But the thing is that I hadn't quite finished. I was going to say that it's never going to be a big thing in their current format. I thought we'd probably get there around about the 4th generation, but we're actually on the 4th generation now, and that's not enough generations for us to get there. So I think it can do, but we're still probably one or two, maybe more generations away from it hitting that tipping point. However, getting back to the question about the OSs and so on, Google has this habit, right, of playing with hardware, right? The Pixel phones, right? Everybody knows that the Pixel phones are, at least as good as any other Android phones, right? But you can't even buy them in New Zealand. And Google doesn't seem serious about selling them. Doesn't seem serious about making them and getting them to market. They're a bit of an experiment. I mean, they're not always better than the other devices in all areas, and they've got these issues now with the poor facial recognition, and in the latest, they've got problems there. But you're right. I mean, they don't seem that exactly.
committed in New Zealand. In fact, one of our listeners messaged me and said, "Well, look, you're calling out Google for not respecting their New Zealand customers and not launching here." And look, I think all of the other big international brands are launching product in New Zealand. They're launching them consistently. Google haven't. I looked up, okay, who's the country manager? And then I realised the Google country manager for New Zealand is the country manager of Google advertising business.
Yeah.
And we also in New Zealand have someone heading up their cloud business, but there's actually no one to represent
which was the point, which is exactly where I was going with this, right?
Yeah.
Is because Google is an advertising business. All this other stuff, right, is, I mean, I'm sorry, if you're a Google product fan, and the stuff is the stuff is lovely, but it's a distraction to them. It's not the business. It's not the core business. I mean, if tomorrow it became the core business, then I'm sure they could actually wipe out whole ecosystems with their excellent products. But they don't. It's not important. And there's possibly some explanations for that. One is that no one actually makes much money out of Android phones. And Google is a company which makes 70-80% margins on the rest of its business. They're not going to bust a gut for a market where you're really lucky you might make 5 or 7% on hardware sales. So it's just not what they're about. They're not. I mean, the nasty way of putting it is they're in the market just to toy with us. And tempt us and toy with us. I don't think that's actually the truth. What I think is I think they're actually throwing ideas out there to see what sticks, and it's also a way that they can learn a lot about their other activities. And one day they will chuck something out there which is an overnight hit, and they'll probably go for hell for leather with it,
and everyone will follow in their footsteps. I was listening to the mobile tech podcast episode a week or so back around the Pixel 4, and it was interesting. I mean, they're definitely throwing some stuff out there that's a bit different. They've got this radar in there, so you can use gesture controls in order to fit that in. They've had to shrink the battery down, so the battery life's not that good. So they're doing something somewhat different to what everyone else is doing.
And the thing is that it sounds like I'm being offensive to the people that are their fans that like their gear, but I'm not, because I like their gear. But to a degree, we're guinea pigs. We're their test markets. Now, a long time ago, when I was first writing about technology, I remember having a rather drunken American technology executive come to me and he said, You might call them early adopters. We call them mugs. I mean, the man had too much to drink, but he knew, right, that they were making money from testing things, and it was, there's a degree of that. I don't think that's actually what's going on with Google. I think Google is literally throwing ideas out to see what sticks and see if they can come up with something great. You know what it reminds me a bit of? Back in the days, the early 80s and 70s, Zero Park used to do that. There used to be this bunch of hippies somewhere in California sitting around on beanbags, probably smoking dope.
Oh, Xerox.
Yeah, and they came up with great ideas. Yeah. One of the ideas they came up with is a mouse. And another idea they came up with is a graphical user interface. That is... And we could be seeing that kind of thing going on with Google, that they're literally throwing ideas out there. And that some of those ideas that are products that we're seeing emerge in some of today's products will actually be mainstream things, 5 years from now.
Yep, quite possible. Now onto a couple of other things on the device front quite quickly. Apple's AirPods Pro is the correct name. I keep wanting to call them the AirPod Pros, and no, they're the AirPods Pro. They arrived last week, and I've been trying them out. And the thing that caught me to start with was getting them to fit in my ears.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure if I'd got the right size, and I was saying, no, that's not quite the right fit. And they come with three tips, I guess white sort of rubber or whatever it's made out of. And so I changed down to the smaller size, and I thought, that's a bit more comfortable. Then I realised that on iOS you need to go into your Bluetooth settings, and there's a couple of things there. But one is quite important, is that once you've got the tip on the earbuds and you put them into your ear, and this is very important for the noise cancelling, it actually runs a little test.
Yeah.
And it works out whether there's actually any leakage of air flow from inside to outside your ear, and then once you've got a tight fit, it will let you know. And it actually put me back to what I thought wasn't quite the right fit, which was the medium size. And it told me no, that's what fits. The other thing that I learned is apparently it also does an equalisation. When you're on a plane and your ears are popping and so on. Well, when you put these things in, they're blocking air, in your ear, and apparently it will actually balance it out, so you're equalised and balanced both, in the ear and outside. So there's some smart stuff that it does there.
I haven't tried these new ones, but I've got the original AirPods. And I've also got some noise cancelling headphones. The noise cancelling headphones, by the way, do that similar thing. You can do a trial run and optimise for the conditions that you're in. And of course, it's the sort of thing, you're on a plane, you wake up, put the headphones on, and you press the wrong damn thing, and you go through the whole equalisation all over again. I think Apple has actually got a hit product. I mean, they had a hit product on their hand with the first ones. And there are issues. I mean, apparently the batteries don't last long. Apparently that's a bit wasteful. But I actually love them. It's one of those things that I took to almost immediately. You see them, you read about them, you think, I don't know, I'm not sure about these. Try them on, and I was sold within about 40 minutes of audio.
Very, very convenient. The sound is good. The noise cancelling for what they are, I think is very reasonable. I've got no dramas there. Obviously, if you put something big right over your ears, then that's potentially going to, it is going to give you a better level of noise cancellation. But yeah, for something that you can just pop in your pocket and you've got them with you all the time, it's a little bit like the big digital SLR versus the phone you've got in the pocket.
Wow,
the convenient one is the one you've got with you all the time, and all of these portable earbuds are small enough you can carry them around with you.
Yeah, easily. I mean, what I'd really like is some Bluetooth reference headphones, but that's another thing entirely.
Yes, well, anything's possible in the future, Bill, apparently, but I'm not sure we'll get that sort of reference quality audio anytime soon. It's something you can squeeze into your pocket. Now, the other gadget that caught my attention was the Mavic Mini Pro from Mavic Mini from DJI, which is just launched in the last few days. And this is a drone that comes in 249 grams, so it's probably less than the weight of two smartphones. It's small enough that when you fold it out, it can you can fit it on your hand, launch it out of your hand. Not the 4K video that some of the higher end DJI drones have. but coming in, that convenience of being smaller and at a nicer price point. So I think we're seeing it launched into the New Zealand market. It was something like $700 for the Mavic Mini locally. So
Is there a specific application they're selling it for? Is it just fun?
Look, I think that when you look at where these things get used, other than just for fun, there's sort of real estate photography. There's
But is it? I mean, that's what I meant. Is it good enough for that?
Well, I mean, from the bits and pieces I've read on it, and I haven't had time to pop into DJI Ferntech, who sort of do the local distributor, have a look. But the things I've read say it's very stable. I've looked at some footage of it where it's being buffeted around in the wind, but it's still got
we don't have that in New Zealand.
Really good stabilization.
Yeah.
So even though the drone is actually moving, the video footage is nice and static and smooth. So
it's probably all sort of small drone applications then.
I think it's going to me, this will be will be a very popular purchase, sort of coming towards Christmas.
Well, completely unlike the AirPods.
Very. I mean, it's got some good uses. There's a whole lot of scenarios. A bit more expensive than the AirPods, but what are we talking? $669.
Well, not that much more expensive.
Dollars coming into the New Zealand market, or they've got their Fly More combo, which is very common with some of the DJIs, at around $900, and I think that comes with extra batteries and protector things for the props, so you don't go and get cut by the propellers, because it provides a bit of protection and case and whatnot. So that I think this is a product that's going to be in hot demand. And look, DJI don't necessarily need to be releasing new products all the time, and they don't, because they've got such a big market share. But this is one that really expands the potential customer base for them. And of course, when they release those lower end ones, there's a little bit of potentially losing some sales of the higher end product. But what they don't have on this one is that object detection, which is one of the big issues with drones. Especially, I mean, I don't know. My drone flying is a little bit like my skills at driving games on, Xbox, etc. I'm not that good at it, and it's very easy for a drone to hit a tree or some other sort of obstacle. So that's really the Achilles heel with these these low cost drones, and hence the one we were talking about on the show a couple of weeks ago, which has got this incredible detection. You can fly it through trees, and it will it'll just scoot around the things, and it's a $1,000 price, but not being launched in New Zealand anytime soon. So nice anyway to see that option coming into the market, and well worth having a look at if you've been waiting for a drone with a reasonable sort of camera, and one that's it's quite portable to be taking about with you on travels, etc., or to do photography.
It's one of those things where I completely love the idea, but I just couldn't possibly justify buying.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean to say I wouldn't buy one.
Now on to there's a bit of New Zealand stuff we should be talking about. Spark have turned on their 5G coverage across the America's Cup course on the harbour, the Waitemata Harbour. So
they already had, I think, one site in
Auckland Central, down at the grid AKL, where they've had their Spark lab for varying companies sort of dabbling and testing out 5G. And of course that was done in conjunction with Huawei. So this is an extension of that, and what they've highlighted is that this will allow our New Zealand America's Cup team rather than a difficult sort of offload of all the data that they're collecting off hard drives, and I think they were talking about data basically going from the boat to the chase boat over Wi-Fi, so they need to keep the range right, and then they were taking it off on USB discs or something to analyse overnight, and they'll be able to move this to happen over the mobile network.
It's just not going to be reliable with Wi-Fi. First thing, right?
Of course,
just not. Look,
not unless you keep that chase boat really close, and you've got someone there to point the to point it in the right direction, right?
Well, look, I was talking to some people at the last week's Vodafone 5G function.
Yeah.
And the real promise of 5G, and this is something which we've known about for some time, but now that it's actually happening, and you've got to remember the Vodafone launch is probably about a month away now. The real promise of 5G is machine-to-machine communication, which is what Spark's talking about there with collecting data from the boat.
Yeah.
That's what it's really optimized for. That's what it's really good at, and that's where it's really going to make a huge difference. I mean, it's all very nice to have 5G on your mobile phone, but you can already stream cricket from Sri Lanka on your mobile phone as you're going to work, on the bus anyway. You don't need 5G for that. 4G will handle that perfectly adequately. There's not much for consumers other than virtual reality, which is a whole different kettle of fish, which I don't want to get into right now. There's not much that you can do for a consumer with 5G that you can't already do.
And so in one way or another. I mean, there will, I'm sure, be benefits in rural locations, locations where you don't get fibre, for
certainly
instance,
with things like 4.5 and
performance
4.9G and so on. But this level of data collection is precisely what 5G brings, and to choose those America Cup boats as a showcase for that is actually a terrific, high-profile way of showing New Zealand businesses and industry just what they can be doing. I mean, one of the most amazing things that I saw last week at that, I mean, I know it's the rival phone company, but the Vodafone presentation was the idea of you can have a factory where all the equipment is immediately configurable because nothing is cabled up to the network. Everything is on a 5G network. And in a sense, what's going on with collecting data off the boats and going back, without having to go back via Wi-Fi and so on, means that the people sitting in the control centres for these boats can actually deal with the data in real time. So you can trim sails in real time. I mean, with the latency and so on of 5G, you can. I mean, I'm sure that there's some of the decisions to be human-made and some of them will be made by machine. But what you're doing is you're actually being able to collect information from the physical world, take it into the virtual world, then send the results of what you've learnt back into the physical world. All within milliseconds.
Yeah, impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah. Now, I think it's going to be good, the results that we see, but it's actually going to take quite some time for all the dots to be joined up, and for the use case, a little bit like ultra fast broadband and fibre. When that first came out, it was cool, but we didn't have as much of a need for it. The more that time goes on, the more that people expect it. We found more reasons to need that sort of bandwidth, more reasons to need that sort of reliability as businesses have moved away from servers to cloud-based systems. And the
other part of that, of course, is that the cloud's coming to the edge of the network as well. So you'll see a lot more edge computing as a result of this happening. But as the real thing about Spark doing that with the America's Cup is it's a fabulously good showcase for the technology and what it can do. And it's interesting because the two, Spark and Vodafone, are they're talking as though there's a bit of a race between about who's going to get the network out first. I mean, there's a little bit about our network was first, now ours was in the recent announcements. But the reality is that Vodafone has a practical working network, or will have a practical working network in cities across New Zealand before Christmas.
That customers will actually be able to tap into
in
some form, depending on what devices they have.
Whereas Spark is actually showcasing it with a specific, high profile example, which is, so both of them have actually got very good strategies here.
Yeah, I think it's good. And look, bring on the innovation that will come. I think Spark's approach of having that lab set up early on will serve them well. Vodafone, obviously under their new ownership, have been able to jump in and pip Spark to the post, as it were, in terms of actually getting out a product that's available for people to start utilising. But it'll be some time away until we've got that big mass adoption, until we're able to really draw on all of the promises of 5G. I mean, you talk about that sort of edge compute, which they highlight as being one of the exciting things of 5G, but there's I think there's a whole lot of pieces of that puzzle to be worked out in terms of, look, we're used to the Netflixes and all the different services that we tap into, usually sitting in certain data centers at the moment, and this idea of some of that those systems then basically being at the cell site location to improve performance,
and some of them will be back at the what we used to call the exchange as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what those use cases are where it makes sense to actually have that computing power super close to your whatever it is, your smartphone, your autonomous car, or what have you, and where we really need those things. And I think that certainly some of that is up for debate. I mean, the autonomous car comes up quite regularly as needing 5G.
No, I've got a real problem with that, right? If it needs 5G, it's not autonomous. Right? I mean, the word autonomous means it's not remotely controlled, right? So
well, I mean, I'm in a somewhat similar camp. When I look at the vehicles that exist today that do autonomous anything, they generally are able to operate, as you say, they're on their own. And you need that because we're not going to have 5G everywhere. Now, there's another part of the picture which, well, these things are collecting a whole lot of data, and the Teslas and the Waymos and so on of this world will want to be sucking that data back and analysing it and improving their AIs. That is something where I can see 5G could easily be relevant at the moment, and this is sort of the disconnect, a little bit like the America's Cup example. My Tesla has a level of connectivity to the internet with LTE, but for big chunks of data, download of firmware and things like that, generally that's been over Wi-Fi when I'm parked somewhere. Now at the moment they're actually giving away screeds of LTE data because you can stream Netflix and YouTube at Tesla's expense, and in fact it's a great way if you want to watch what was the series someone was asking me about? Peaky Blinders the other day. You can't stream it on Netflix in New Zealand, but there's an Australian homed SIM card in the Tesla, so it comes up as an Australian IP address. So I was accessing it the other day while I was waiting for family, and there's Peaky Blinders Series 5 has popped up, and I can stream it at Tesla's cost, which I thought was kind of funny.
No, that's a favourite of mine. Well, I was going to say, but that's the other thing that I think, to the credit of both Spark and Vodafone, is the emphasis is very much on those industrial applications. And I think that's probably, I mean, when I was at Mobile World Congress earlier this year, that's what I picked up, is that it's an industrial first technology. It's really for the businesses. At the Vodafone function last week, there was this great example of a guy remotely controlling a crane, and you think, well, that's not that exciting an application, but it is, because he was doing it from a couple of 100 kilometres away. And the thing was that it had this very, very low latency, for the connection, which you wouldn't naturally expect in any kind of wireless communications. There was another good example of a factory which was being run, which we've already mentioned about how...
That was the Ego electric vehicle manufacturing facility in Germany.
It can be instantly reconfigured because there's no wires connecting the various bits and pieces.
That's pretty tempting to me. Like I can see that. And today, if you look inside businesses, there's a level of Wi-Fi use that's kind of okay. I was going to mention
just that point because I asked the guy who was talking about that. I said to him, speaking away from the speech, I said, but surely this can all be done with Wi-Fi. He said, no. He said, you can probably get about 20 connections from a Wi-Fi network in a factory before it just tops out. Right? The thing about 5G is it's one-to-one, but you can have the cell site actually in the factory. The factory will have its own cell site.
Own internal cell site.
And it may even have its own bandwidth. It'll buy a network slice from the carrier. So it's not good. So, you don't have a problem with kids going by using their phones and suddenly everything stops. It's not going to happen. They're going to be on their own network. So it's... it's really quite impressive but that's what 5G is all about.
What did you mean by the one-to-one? Because it's still going to be sort of sliced up between the number of users connecting, isn't it? But
but what I mean is that with Wi-Fi, it's just broadcast bandwidth. I mean, it is the same thing with 5G, but the way that it operates means that there's actually a direct link between the device and it's basically because of the speed and the latency that happens, that you're not constantly, not everything is broadcasting at once and conflicting.
Well, anything we can do to make wireless communications of devices more reliable, I think, is going to be enticing for people, because there's lots of environments where today we and in fact most business environments where we still have Ethernet cables run because it's most reliable and it performs best. Now it would seem a little bit strange that instead of going over your own network, you might buy a slice of Vodafone or Spark's 5G network to do it. I'm not sure whether that's would be a common reality, but I'm very interested to see how it actually plays out.
The way it would work
is
if you've got a factory, say in, I don't know, Hamilton, right? You would have your own local cell. You'd only buy the one cell site. You're not buying access to the entire 5G network. You're just buying local access on one site. But I guess you would be using their bandwidth when you do it. So it's. I think it's a way. I think it's also a way that the likes of Vodafone and Spark can get themselves into that industrial networking sector. Going back to what you mentioned about Ethernet, one of the other things that I've seen in the last sort of 12 months or so is fibre to the desk.
Yes.
And fibre to the desk is, it's the right product for. It's not the right product for these factories, for example, but it's the right product for certain applications. And once the fibre gets to the desk, it's usually distributed around by Wi-Fi at that point anyway. The other thing about Wi-Fi, though, is that Wi-Fi has been, has been the bottleneck, particularly in New Zealand where we got gigabit internet. I've tested perhaps half a dozen to a dozen different routers at home, and the best that I've seen is 430 megabits per second on any router, and the worst that I've seen is only about sort of 370, 380. So so it doesn't matter how fancy looking your router is, doesn't matter what go fast stripes it's got on it or fancy sort of robotic looking multiple aerials and so on. It doesn't really make very much difference. However, that's all about to change very soon with Wi-Fi 6, of course. I'm sure you've already talked about that on here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've actually. I'm trying to think if we actually tested a Wi-Fi 6 or AX 802.11 AX Wi-Fi, but I mean the technology's sort of been coming for a while now, starting to come through, of course, in our newest devices and laptops and so on. So that will become mainstream, and it will help from a number of perspectives. I'm not sure it's it's not a complete game changer, but it does help. I saw one of the vendors actually the other day with their previous generation AC Wi-Fi, offering to send through some review devices, and they were talking about basically being able to plug multiple Ethernet cables into it so that it could get more than gigabit type speeds. But as you say, it's more common that you're not actually getting those greater than gigabit speeds.
Oh, you're half a gigabit.
But before we wrap up, Spark Sport. We're now at the end of the Rugby World Cup. We can cry and all of those things about the results of the World Cup, and some people certainly were making a lot of noises about Spark's streaming,
particularly early on. Yeah,
but I guess I'm still in a sort of similar place to where I was leading up to it, and that was that. Look, yes, some people are going to get problems for all sorts of reasons. They weren't ready in time. They got the wrong device. Their Wi-Fi is rubbish. They didn't plug a cable in when they could have, etc. I mean, look, it's technically it's more complex than an installer putting a satellite dish on your roof. You wire up to your box, and there isn't so much oddities that can go on between that. But I mean, my experience of it was mostly pretty good. I saw the odd issue, but nothing too major.
I've been using Spark Sport since the Premier League season started.
Yeah.
I've probably watched far more hours each week of soccer of the Rugby World Cup, and
whereas I've been watching the Formula One prior to the Rugby World Cup.
Well, I was going to say, and with Sky Go, the cricket. So I probably watch far too many hours each week than's good for me. And I can say, that I've witnessed probably 5 to 10 minutes of dodgy picture on Spark Sport in all that time out, and that would be a small percentage. Now, I know that there were people that had a real problem on the first night, and it's a real problem. It's something that Sparks acknowledged. But as a journalist, I feel kind of bad saying this, because I feel bad about defending Sparks so much over this as well. But the thing is the reaction to it was out of all proportion. Yeah. I've been sitting in rooms watching test matches on Sky when the rain kicks in. The rain fade kicks in.
Yeah.
And this was no worse than that. What I think is really going on is it's change. People are not comfortable with change. And there's probably the if you think of the bell curve of tech adopters in New Zealand, the biggest rugby fans will be towards the bottom of that bell curve in general. And so I think there's two things going on. I think there's conservatism and change, and fear of change is part of it. I also think that a lot of those people signed up right at the last minute, as you would, as we all would, because I sat down with Jeff Latch, who's the head of Spark Sport, during the tournament.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I really thought running up to the tournament that I was getting fed up to the back teeth with all the reminders about checking your network. Well, clearly what I thought was far too many reminders, clearly that wasn't enough. And yet that's just human nature. I mean, the same thing happened in our house. The same thing happened when we switched over from the analog TV signals.
Preview.
And I think it might have actually been for another sports tournament. I can't remember which one now. I had to very last minute. I had to go and get a dish installed so we could watch Freeview. For a tournament. So I'm just as guilty of that as everyone else. But I think a lot of the aggro was just to do with that kind of thing, and not really to do with the technology. Yeah,
and look, I felt some of the media were really trying to pile it on. I went to Microsoft's partner awards event, and who was it that was hosting it? I think it might have been Meharangi Forbes. and she was just laying the boot in, sort of making these jokes about Spark, but not probably clicking, and maybe her speech didn't get checked by Microsoft first, that actually probably one of Microsoft's biggest two partners in New Zealand would be Spark. So it didn't go down very well, because everyone there was either Spark, maybe that was, I don't know, 1 in 10 or 20 people or something, and then everyone else knew people at Spark, and actually also probably knew that for the most part it was going reasonably well.
And the other thing is that when it didn't go well, the emergency plan kicked in, and kicked in well.
Yeah.
But it turns out, right, that on the night of the first South Africa game, when people had a bad experience, the numbers watching the Spark streaming service dropped by about 5,000.
Yeah, it wasn't much. It was quite a small percentage.
But there probably have been more people that were affected than that. But we're still probably talking about no more than 10 to 15% tops of people that were affected. Well, rain fade. That's all I got to say. Rain fade.
Oh, well, good to see lots of competition. Of course, Vodafone with the new Vodafone TV box, which is helping to stir things up. And last week we mentioned Apple TV Plus. That has arrived. Been having a look. Seems to work well. Not a mass amount of content, but it works. I think we're probably out of time to sort of delve too much into that, Bill.
Yeah, I haven't. We probably are, but I haven't tried that yet. But I was going to say the reason I haven't tried that yet is because we're overwhelmed by the number of options now.
That's right. And too many choices and subscriptions.
I'm not paying for all of them. I mean,
being on a new iPhone, albeit a review device, that device linked up to my account and said, you've got a year free. So I think what you'll find is that Apple will have screeds of customers, because if you have to pay for it, it's $9.99, so it's not crazy money if there's a bit of content in there you really want. And then there's a whole segment of the market that will have at some point in the recent times have bought a new iPhone or a new Mac, etc., or a new iPad, and have got that free access.
Netflix, for Prime, for Neon, for Lightbox, how many of those are you going to buy?
Well, the trick is not to pay for them and get them bundled with something else, which certainly seems to be part of the game.
I think there's going to be some kind of aggregation as well at some point.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Great to catch up. Now, where do people track you down online?
Bill Bennett, with 2 N's and 2 T's. Bill Bennett NZ on Twitter, and billbennett.co.nz on my website. But it's been a bit quiet lately. I've been busy.
You have been. I did notice you've been busy writing for others rather than managing to put too much on your own blog. But there's regularly good content on there.
Yeah, we're heading into the quieter time of the year, that will probably change within days, I think.
Yeah. Well, a big shout out and thank you to the companies that are standing behind NZTechPodcast and making the show possible as we evolve the show. We've been testing some streaming today. I don't know how successful that's been, because I've been chatting to everybody, but I will find out after the show. But we're in the process of moving streaming so that it's not just on Facebook, so that it will also be on YouTube. So you'll be able to look out for us in both of those places. But thank you to those brands that have got behind the show and are supporting us: Samsung, Sumo Logic, Vocus, Spark, Vodafone, and HP. Now, we have managed to line up actually Vodafone's local Chief Technology Officer, Tony Baird, to come and talk to us. I think that's in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be hearing a bit more delving into 5G from Vodafone's perspective, and we'll certainly be hearing more from, I'm sure, that the Spark side. Unfortunately, the reality is 2 Degrees are a little bit quiet on the 5G front. They don't have too much to announce on that front, but great to see the competition there going on between Spark and Vodafone.
Yeah, well, a couple of months ago, it looked like that for Vodafone too. So
yes,
it can change fast.
It can. That is very true. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, where we will be we're starting to put some bits and pieces up there on LinkedIn. So if you just search for NZ Tech Podcast on LinkedIn, you will find our posts added to your feed. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you listening in to the show, and we'll catch you again next week. See ya.